He was talking to a friend, Jez Wilkins, at the side of the road. However, Jane and Jerry remember the scene differently.
See, I think you were about here. And I think you were standing like that, and Jez was there with his pram pointing down that way. Because I think if you'd have been looking at me, because I would have said something, because I would have said about, because Kate had been moaning that you'd been gone a long time watching the football.
I'm almost...
Someone made a comment recently that they had seen nothing new in my coverage, nothing new in 18 years, despite my visit to Praia de Luz a few weeks ago. That may be true for you, I mean, but that's not what matters to me. It's whether I have learned anything new, and in this analysis, I'm going to share probably the biggest thing I learned on this trip in 2025, or certainly something that I've thought about in a way I hadn't before. It's not that I didn't know about Kelly's Bar. It's just that I perhaps hadn't appreciated its significance fully.
I got nightmares in my head, I fear. Thoughts build up until I can't feel. My mind fills up into a creature, and it haunts me somewhere much deeper. I got nightmares in my head, I swear.
Hello and welcome to True Crime Rocket Science, the most authentic voice in true crime. I hope wherever you are, you're enjoying your weekend, and I hope you're going to find this analysis quite meaningful, quite interesting. I went inside Kelly's Bar on May 6th, that's just a couple of weeks ago, shortly after 10 p.m. And I think it was the first time I found the bar fully operational. It's not the first time I've been there, but I've often gone there at night or when it was closed. But open, all lights on, screens lit, folks watching the footer, drinks served, and the rest of it, that buzz. I think that this was the first time I'd really experienced that aspect. And actually wanted to go in. I'm not really much of a bar fly. I don't really drink that much. But on this occasion, I actually wanted to go in, and I actually engaged with a pint-sized, short-haired waitress who turned out to be South African. I told her I wanted to sit down and eat something, but she said that the kitchen was closed. So I snapped a quick photo with my phone, this one, and left. Brief as that encounter was with Kelly's Bar, the experience would percolate in my mind over the next couple of days. There are dozens of bars and watering holes, restaurants, kiosks, and whatnot in Luz, but Kelly's Bar is unique. How is it unique? Well, it's that it's an Irish pub. This year, Kelly's Bar seemed to have rebranded itself slightly as a sports bar. And that incidental addition is likely what prodded my mind to circle back and look at it again. I mean, you remember what Jane Tanner said in that little bit of reenactment dialogue where she said, well, Kate had been moaning that you were watching the football, right? So I did start thinking about this Irish pub again, Kelly's Bar.
Closer, please. Closer.
Now, before we get to the rest of this analysis, just to note to the Brits watching, I was near Los Cristianos in Tenerife 2 days ago, which is another British enclave filled with British-themed bars, this time in the Canary Islands, which is Spanish territory, not Portuguese. I was there to investigate the Jay Slater case, amongst other things. By the way, if you're from Britain and you don't know about the case, you might want to look at my coverage on it. Anyway, I was there. But hearing the revelry, which I also saw along the strip of Puerto del Carmen in Lanzarote, there's a similar situation going on there. Locals serving up British culture. In other words, Spanish locals or Portuguese locals serving British appetites, right? Locals serving up British culture to British tourists. And there I really appreciated the role of the British pub as a sort of cultural fixture. And with that, sport, football specifically, as another cultural fixture. And what happens when you combine those, the pub culture and the sport culture? Well, you have this camaraderie, you have the sense of, being home. You have that sort of buzz that people can share and enjoy while being, further afield. And so I'm going to be revisiting some of the sights and sounds of Tenerife and how it relates to the Jay Slater case, but I think it's important to emphasize here the sort of intertextuality in terms of this aspect, how the Kelly's Bar conundrum stewed in my mind in other places, and also how other places reminded me of it. There were also other Kelly's bars in these other territories, not necessarily with the same name, but with the same intention, to lure a specific brand of Brit far from home into a place that felt just like home. So who did Kelly's Bar lure in Luge? Before we get to that, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do. If you're finding this analysis worthwhile, please do hit the thanks button, and let's get started.
Jane and Jerry remember the scene differently.
See, I think you were about here. And I think you were standing like that, and Jez was there with his pram pointing down that way. Because I think if you'd have been looking at me, because I would have said something, because I would have said about, because Kate had been moaning that you'd been gone a long time watching the football.
Well, Kelly's Bar lured the Irish, certainly, which is why the most important witnesses in the McCann case were where they were. They were an Irish family in an Irish bar. No surprises there. The bar itself is 450 meters from the door of apartment 5 and barely 10 meters, barely 20 seconds from the sighting itself on Travessa del Escola Primaria. This is an excerpt from the PJ files. Kelly's Bar hasn't attracted much attention in the 18 years since Madeleine disappeared, with a few exceptions. About 5 to 6 years ago, immediately preceding Christian Bruckner being named prime suspect, British cops visited Praia de Luge and specifically Kelly's Bar. Let's go to the Mirror. Carol, 59, who has lived in the Algarve since 1997, told us they came into the bar, that's the British police, and said, "You can thank Her Majesty for this visit." That's when I knew they were from Scotland Yard. They asked if I could remember May 3rd, 2007. Carol said the police visited her 2 weeks ago, first at the bar, followed by an interview at her home. She went on, "They were asking about Madeleine and interested in my German ex-boyfriend, this guy, Michael Geller. We were in an 18-month relationship, but at the time of Maddie's disappearance, hadn't been together for years. There's no reason to suspect him at all. I'm amazed I'm being asked about him. He was a friendly hippie." I just find it so strange, the whole thing. The police asked if I had any contact numbers or if I was friends on Facebook, but I'm not. It is the second time Kelly's Bar, a 4-minute walk from the McCann's apartment, has been mentioned in the investigation. Anyone know what the first time or the first mention was? And so the article also notes that the latest developments come as it is revealed for the first time that Scotland Yard detectives visited Portugal 5 times in 2019. The cops likely wanted to question Michael Geller because he was German, and because he was German, perhaps he knew or had seen Christian Bruckner, or could suggest other Germans who were in the area at the time.
I have spoken to someone who was staying very close to flat 5A on the night of May the 3rd. She says the first that she was aware of a missing child was 10:30, and she's sure of that because she says the BBC 10 o'clock news had just finished. She says that she heard Kate McCann sobbing, repeating over and over again, "We've let her down." She also says that she heard the first Portuguese policeman arrive, and he said she must have walked out because there's no sign of a break-in.
Now, Kate McCann in her book refers to the Irish roots both her and Jerry shared, as well as the fact that the McCann name, McCann, is a prototypically Irish name. She writes in her book Madeleine, "We both came from ordinary working-class Catholic families with Irish roots. Like me, Jerry had attended Catholic schools and gone to Mass on Sundays." Then lower down he talks about, their names would have given a pretty strong clue as to their common heritage, Irish heritage. And Jerry's dad was a joiner like hers. His mum, Eileen, had been born in Glasgow to Irish parents. Then look at the reference to Irish in Kate's book. 9 references, not many, but not none. And yet Kate never mentions the Irish pub that is barely 2 minutes walk from the lower end of the tapas bar and less than 5 minutes walk from their own apartment. There you have it, Kelly's Bar, 0 matches found. You would think Kelly's Bar is worthy of at least one mention, seeing as though it is directly related to the sighting around the corner. Kelly's Bar is the only British anchor really in the area. If you wanted to explain to someone brand new to the case where the sighting near to 10 p.m. happened, you'd start with Kelly's Bar, wouldn't you? The other thing that stands out is that if it's an Irish bar, and if the McCanns were not only Irish but fond of eating out, fond of that whole pub experience, and weren't they? Didn't they visit Kelly's pub when they were on holiday in Luge? But it goes even deeper than that. Jerry's father John was apparently born in an Irish pub, and his mother Eileen owned and operated one in Ireland. So the pub culture, and in particular the Irish pub culture, ought to run deeper in the McCanns and deeper in Jerry than in most pub-happy Brits, wouldn't you say? So why isn't Kelly's Bar mentioned in Kate's book? Because Kate goes to some length to describe Jerry's colourful Irish roots. There's also the mention of Jerry being keen on sport. Didn't he head to Kelly's Bar to watch a game with any of his countrymen while on holiday in Luge? That's something the Brits often do, and I saw them doing that over the past couple of weeks.
Primarily what we sought to do from the beginning is try and draw everything back to zero, if you like. Try and sort of take everything back to the beginning and then reanalyse and reassess everything, accepting nothing. The careful and critical analysis of the timeline has been absolutely key. Primarily, we're focused on the area between 8:30 and 10.
Now, I've mentioned Jerry being keen on sport. We know that they were playing tennis almost every day. We know that they were going running every day. We know that Jerry was interested in football. We also know that there's a T-shirt of Madeleine wearing a football team's T-shirt. Interestingly, an Irish newspaper reports that the McCanns were in Ireland over Easter in 2007, months before Madeleine died. It was a ritual to visit the island every year, and probably while there, wouldn't they visit the pub that his mother owned? Look at this coverage from the Irish Independent from October 2012. The pub aspect appears to be so significant, the family took this photo of Madeleine in front of a pub in Ireland in 2007.
Even at this point, the message is being controlled.
We were a bit naughty because we did have messages coming out of the police station, which we weren't supposed to.
Well, the text messages.
Yeah.
And yet, following Madeleine's disappearance, the McCanns stopped their annual pilgrimage to Ireland. Why? Was it too painful? Or was it because they didn't want to draw too much attention to this area? What do you think? Thank you for listening, and I'll see you guys next time.